네. 다시 저희 이제 세 분.
Okay, let us start the panel discussion. So, once again, I would like to thank our three presenters. This is an early morning, and we do not have a big audience today. Still, the discussion on cruise is important, and this is the 18th World Ocean Forum, and the cruise session started 4 years ago. At the 15th World Ocean Forum, we started to discuss the K-cruise. And last year, we talked about the potential as the port of call. And we still have many questions whether we have a potential to become the next driving force of the Korean economy. Still, we ask these questions ourselves and try to find an answer through this kind of discussion. And we invited 3 panelists. So we are supposed to have 4 panelists. So we wanted a global session. That's why we invited a Japanese speaker. And from the Shanghai International Cruise Business Institute, we were supposed to have Deputy Director Chiu Ling from China. However, at the very last minute, Director said that she cannot participate in our session online. She wanted to participate in person. However, she couldn't, so she wanted to be here online, but she canceled at the last minute as well. So we only have 3 panelists. On my left side, the former Executive Vice President of Korea Tourism Organization, we have Mr. Jae-kyong. Thank you for joining us. And Director Chang Woo-seok from the Secretary of Chairman's Office, PanStar Group. And we have Director Choi Jae-hwan from the Marine Leisure Tourism Division of the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. And let us start with Mr. Lee. So I've already mentioned this briefly. And Mr. Lee worked at Korea Tourism Organization for almost 32 years, and since 2016, he worked as the Vice President of GKL, so he has experiences in the public and private sectors. So I would like to ask your opinion. The Korean cruise industry, what problems do we have and what do we have as our opportunities?
Thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm happy to be here. First of all, thank you so much for the presentation. I really enjoyed your insights. So for Ms. Che, you mentioned the South Coastal Area cruise product. So this belt has been on our agenda for a long time, but the development process of any tourism product starts from domestic tourism that expands into the overseas product. So for further development of the domestic tourism industry, we need to focus on laying stronger foundation. And I really agree to your point in that sense. And for second presentation, so I can see how you have researched in this area. And for Korean cruise ships in 2014, 2015, Grand Korea Leisure Week paid a lot of attention to these topics. And you mentioned how it didn't bear fruit. And I was involved in the project myself. So for a casino where Korean nationals can also enter, we have some tasks regarding this, and maybe we can see some results in the future. And for the third presentation, Japan has better infrastructure, better facilities, and sometimes we're quite jealous. But one thing we can learn from Japan is how you join hands among the local governments and the cruise companies to develop some programs and products. So the end of the day, the tourism is all about doing analog. So you need to first have good content. So you are doing well in developing great contents, and I think that's something we can learn from. And what I'd like to share with you here is that cruise industry is closely related to tourism industry, and brand making is very important. And I always have high interest in cruise industry, and I also read some books. But I believe we have a long way to go yet. 8 local governments, eight cities have some cruise products. But a brand or a slogan can sometimes define a certain image. So hardware and system and infrastructure is important, but branding is also important. So that is what we have to work on. And I'm sure all of you know this, but all these global cruise companies have their own brands like Royal and Princess or Prince. So customers already form certain expectations reading these brands. They are quite certain that they're going to get this type of service from certain brands. So I believe we must focus on building these brands so that it can be helpful in marketing. And this is a software part of the story. And to add on Ms. Che's presentation, in April this year, Yangyang International Airport opened officially. and I was also part of this project. So 6 months before the opening, the Danta group, or people from Danta in Japan came to Korea to have discussions about designing the program. And there are many discussions, but one of the thing was about this back-to-back project in connecting flights from Yangyang to Incheon. So what customers, 150 to 300 customers mostly wanted was about shopping experience. So what can they buy in Yangyang? So these customers were curious about what they could buy, the things that they couldn't buy in Japan. And of course, this is good news to local shops too, because it's a good opportunity for them. So my point here is that what I found during my research I read some documents made by Korean organizations regarding cruise products from 32 programs in 8 cities. So it usually takes about 7 to 9 hours. So 6 spots in Jeju, 4 spots in Busan, some spots in Sokcho. So this is the program where they have this plan for passengers. So if they visit the cities and they're going to promote some products and services, so they come in through ships and they jump off to visit the cities. But all these programs, I felt skeptical about the effectiveness. Will this program be helpful to the local economy? Because it seems a little bit detached from the real economy in the local areas. It's a little aloof from the real consumption that's going to help the local economy. So it is not sufficient in really helping the local economy and promoting consumption there. So the casino cruise that was mentioned, and other areas where local economies can be helped. But for any program to be really effective to local economy, it should be built on the consensus of the local people that it is helpful, and it should also be sustainable because it should go on for some time to really take effect to the local economy. So that's what I learned from my research. Thank you.
네, 위원님 말씀 감사합니다. 되게
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. There were so many important points. He shared his opinion on 3 presentations, And we talk about K-Cruise, and he emphasized the importance of a brand, which will be used to attract foreign passengers. And he also emphasized the importance of consumption to revitalize the local economy. The K-Cruise has various aspects, and he also talked about the analog touch, which is closely related to the local context. Thank you for your comment. And moving on, I'm going to invite Director Chang from PanStar Group. And let me introduce our panelists briefly. I started working for Harmony Cruise. It was my first career related to cruise, and he also worked there. And he worked at Hyundai. He was in charge of the cruise tour to between South and North Korea. And Mr. Chang, you can share the recent interest of PanStar Group, and you can share your new business area. Good morning. My name is Chang Woo-seok. I am the director in charge of new business development, and thank you for kind introduction, and thank you for inviting me. And I reviewed the keywords of the forum, and K-Cruise and coastal cruise and national flag carriers were keywords. And Mr. Song's presentation was focused on the reasons of why we couldn't develop the cruise industry in Korea, and he also reviewed the legal and institutional framework. And cruise has not become a full industry in Korea. However, we have about 25 years of history, and 25 years ago, Hyundai wanted to operate a tour program to Kumgangsan Mountain, but we didn't have the land route. That is why they resorted to cruise ship. It was 1998, so it has been already 25 years. And afterward, we had one event in 2006. I work for PanStar Group, and in 2006, PanStar Group bought ferries, and cargo deck was converted for passenger ships. So we started to accommodate coastal cruise. However, the business was discontinued only after a year, and it was 17 years ago. And the next episode took place in 2012. It was about Polaris shipping. It was a bulk cargo ship operator, and the company established a cruise ship business, and they bought a second-hand cruise from Italy, and their journey was also discontinued only after a year because they incurred a huge loss. So all these three episodes took place almost 20 years ago. So we have this history of the cruise business in Korea. Even at the business unit, every attempt failed. That's why we couldn't develop a full industry. So I will give you details if time allows later. But on the screen, you are looking at the cruise ships. That's the ship we are building right now. And we call it a cruise ferry. And this is a new type of a vessel. And it used Korean capital and Korean technologies, and it is being built in the Korean shipyard. And next year in April, we are going to start the commercial operation of the ship. And we had so many ups and downs in the cruise industry in Korea, and we want to foster and basically resume the business in Korea. And next year will be the year of origin for that. So I talked about 3 failed attempts. And it was not until 2015 when we saw the enactment of the Cruise Industry Act. So it was enacted back in 2015, and the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries responded to this enactment, and they had this ambition plan to develop the market with 200,000 consumers by 2020. So I vividly remember their ambition. However, looking back on the past years, the policy goal didn't matter. It is the same as 20 years ago. We didn't see the expansion of the market, both quantitatively and qualitatively. The ministry needed the momentum to push for this policy. However, we faced a pandemic period, unfortunately. However, the pandemic era is over, and the tourism industry is witnessing a recovery. That is why it is time for us to think about what we can do, not only for companies, but for the government and local governments and communities rooted in the ocean. So we have to reflect on the past and think about the future. The K-cruise and coastal cruise are the subtopic of today's session. And we do not have Director Chiu Ling today, so if time allows, I would like to introduce the ship we are building. So can you display the material on the screen, please? So this is the introduction of my company, so I will skip these slides. And I said the cruise ferry, but this is not an academic term or legal term. And in the Baltic Sea or Caribbean Sea and Dover Sea of Europe, basically it is a transportation mean for passengers. However, their quality of service is on par with the level of the cruise ships. And they have stable business on that. So that's the target we have. So we refer to this model of a cruise ferry. So these are the digital image we have in mind, and this is the ship we are building. And the number of rooms is 120, and the passengers accommodation is up to 355. However, compared to the existing cruise ships, it has this luxurious touch inside. And we also have a banquet hall and bar and lounge, therapy room and gymnasium, and wellness centers. These will be all the featured facilities on our ship. And how can we define K-cruise? I believe that we have to reach consensus on the definition first. The students also study the difference between the cruise ships and chartered ships and every other types of ships. And have you experienced the 해랑 열차, the train tour program? So it is between Busan and Seoul So you might use KTX and SRT, and ferry cruise might be similar to KTX and SRT. However, 해랑 열차 program is the equivalent of a cruise program on land. So we would like to target the existing routes, but sometimes we would like to make a deviation, and we can have a 3 nights and 4 days of program. And even though it is a transportation mode, we can provide the leisure and quality of services to the passengers, just like a cruise ship. And that was the starting point of our project, PanStar Miracle. And we have this topic of coastal cruise. And let me just briefly touch upon this one due to a time constraint. And this is the sailing route of a PanStar Dream. It is between Busan and Osaka, and we have 3 voyages every week. And we do not carry cargo during the weekend. It is only for passengers. And next year, in April, we will launch PanStar Miracle, and we have 3 categories of routes. Busan will serve as a home port, and we will visit other cities in Korea as ports of call, and we will visit Kyushu and Vladivostok and Shanghai and Taiwan. That's the itinerary in our mind. And the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries is planning to launch a coastal cruise in South Coast area. And even though the home port is Busan, if the chart owner wants, we can use Busan or Josun as a home port. So that is the idea of a multiple home port program. So this is the end of my presentation, and if time allows, I will give you more information in the Q&A. Thank you.
네, 위원님.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chang. In the private sector, we made requests for further information, and for the past 20 years, we have had this history of the cruise industry in Korea. There have been attempts, but he also mentioned why those attempts have failed. And at the end of the presentation, he introduced the new routes they are going to operate. So when cruise is initiated, we have to develop the programs in different formats. It could be a coastal cruise, but we can develop other types of businesses in the process. But when there is an institutional framework, I believe that that is feasible enough. And I hope that we will actually see that route being operated. If time allows, may I add on to my comment? And we have a director from the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. And we talk about the coastal cruise. And legally speaking, we have the definition of coastal, and we have to follow that. And I agree that we have to activate such business models. However, when we look at the geopolitical situation in Northeast Asia, and when we look at the map of the region, and Korea and Japan are too close to be separate countries. So when we operate a coastal cruise, I think it will be great if we can explore the territorial waters of Japan together. So instead of depending on the legal definition, we have to think about the actual demand of the consumers. So let us move on to Director Choi Jae-hwan from the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries.
올 상반기에 해양수산부와
So in the first half of this year, the Ministry of Sports and Culture and Ministry of Fisheries and Fisheries joined hands to implement some collaborative project. So we call ourselves the One Team Korea. So we invited him to represent the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, and he's the director of Marine Leisure Tourism Division. So he kind of crosses both areas. So I'm going to ask him to share his experience. Thank you for the introduction, and thanks for having me. I really like the introduction. It was fancy, and I also like to thank the presenters and other panelists, and also the audience here. So the big topic here is the coastal cruise. And to take a look at some current issues, as was well mentioned by other panelists and presenters. So the global cruise industry is recovering and recovering well, almost to the level of pre-pandemic. And we can also see this from the Korean trend, which is also recovering to the pre-pandemic age and getting closer to the previous peak. So we are seeing quantitative growth, but are we growing qualitatively too? And what is the impact to the Korean cruise industry? So the tourism industry is going through this trend change, and some positive impact from that will be some promotion to the local economy, and especially from the perspective of cruise industry, we are going to see more active tourism activities in port of call. And of course, we have to think about whether the profits are shared not just among the foreign companies, but also in the Korean companies. So in that sense, we have a long way to go. So we saw this from the Japanese presentation, but as for Korean ports of calls, we can't be the destination. We are just some ports of layover to get to Chinese or Japanese ports. So we are not getting much benefit from this trend. And also from the perspective of local economy boom, I think that's pretty much what I can say about it. And the growth of cruise industry should be linked to the global trend, should be shared domestically too. That's how I see it. And in order for that to be possible, Korean cruise companies have more or better resources to design better programs for Korean passengers. But one of the reasons why Korean flag cruise ships are not many yet. And of course, I'm not saying that we haven't tried. There are attempts, but there are some barriers. So the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries worked hard to activate the coastal cruise industry. And if there are some programs that are feasible, we can link them to other development projects, and we can also expand our work scope to Western coast. And global companies and their products, they mostly come to some major cities in southern coast, but we can also promote other cities, some small or mid-sized cities to be included in that programs. And that could be a good opportunity to build additional infrastructure in those cities. So that could be a driving momentum for mid to small cities to grow further. So would it be possible? I believe the conditions that we have in terms of port facilities and other facilities are good. And port of call tourism, I think what we have is not that bad. Busan, because Busan is getting a lot of foreign passengers, and Incheon, which is close to Seoul, is already getting a lot of tourists, and Sokcho, Yosu, Pohang, Seosan. Pohang and Seosan is close to Kyongju, and Seosan is also famous for some religious attractions. So each city has its own strength. And I also think the timing helps because we are slowly recovering from COVID age, and we're slowly going back to pre-COVID, and ministries of Korean government are implementing various projects. There have been a lot of announcements since June. And we also see some allocation of budgets. And the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries have worked on including the budget for coastal cruise, but we could make it. But we are still trying to include that next year. And we're also implementing a lot of pilot projects. And I do agree to some degree that we need to work on amendments of some of the acts that are related to cruise industry. But there are some regulations that we have to work on first. That's important, but we also need to think of some incentives that could be conducive, and I do agree. And there are some areas where we need to see more deregulation, and casino is one of those areas. So Gangwon land is one exception that allows Korean nationals to come in. So everyone is talking about we need to build a second Gangwon land on board, but I think we need to have social consensus first on that matter. Well, personally, I believe that is the right direction to go to, but that requires further and deeper social consensus. And it always takes longer for any act or law to be amended, to change. So starting from next year, the Port of Calls tourism program will start under the leadership of Ministry of Sports and Culture and Tourism. So I think that is in the same direction. Yes. Thank you for the detailed comments about each presentation. So the cruise program needs to grow, of course, both quantitatively and qualitatively. And you mentioned that. I totally agree with you. And you also mentioned these flagship, the Korean flag cruise ship. A good point. And you also mentioned how the budget was secured for the coastal area cruise tourism product. And you also mentioned this, that global cruise companies have these big ships, and it's really hard for them to come all the way into the small cities. But we need to have this infrastructure to attract them too, and that would also help the local economy. But policy should always be built upon the social consensus and local consensus too. So I think that pretty much wraps up the point. And I'd like to invite further comments.
네, 우선 최선 실장.
So let me first ask Ms. Che. So you had a presentation on coastal cruise. And from the perspective of expansion of the coastal cruise, we have the linkage with China and Japan. Could you give us more opinion on this?
네, 펜스타 위원님도 말씀.
As was mentioned by Mr. Chang and Mr. Che, for coastal cruise to develop and for the cruise industry of Korea to develop, we need to focus on collaborating with the global companies and cruise lines. Japan has this active coastal cruise industry, so we need to work further with Japan to develop some more products, and we need to also work with nearby ports to develop Western line, West Coast line that go all the way to Chinese ports. I think that would be really helpful. And maybe we can think of some MOUs to give some tax benefits to companies that develop the products that use these lines. So I think that would be part of the short-term solutions.
송 변호사님도 추가적.
And Mr. Song, do you have any additional comments? So it was a great discussion. I would like to thank the panelists. When we talk about law, I know that it is hard to revise the law. And before revising the law, we have to achieve the changes in the industry first. I agree. However, we enacted the Cruise Industry Act in 2015, which is 9 years ago. However, the application of the law was not sufficient, and I think the government's and National Assembly's role to review that area. And if we can develop coastal cruise and if we can launch K-cruise, it will be great. So that's what I hope for. Thank you.
시간이 그렇게 많지는 않지만 그래도 오늘
So even though we do not have much time left, it was a great presentation and a great discussion. And now we have more people in the audience. So is there anyone who has questions for our presenters or panelists? Yes, please.
성함 좀 말씀.
Please introduce yourself before asking the question. When I was young, I worked on the ship and I worked at Korea Register, and now I'm working at the shipyard. My name is Im Jong-sik. And I listened to the presentations, and now I have a better understanding of the cruise industry, so it was a great opportunity for me. But I have a question about casino. And it was mentioned that casino will have a great impact on the operation of the cruise ships. And now, in Korea, Korean people are not allowed to enter the casino, and the only exception in Korea is Gangwon Land, which is operated on land. Still, even though idea is there, we didn't have any casino on board. And when we think about the reasons why, it was mentioned that there is no social consensus among the public. But personally, I don't think that is the case. Korean people welcome the idea. However, the policymakers and lawmakers have a problem with that idea. It is allowed in other countries, but it is blocked in Korea. At least we can allow the level of a business which is being operated in other countries, because casino can generate a revenue for cruise business, but we are still blocking the attempts. I don't think that is reasonable. And I don't understand the comment that there is no social consensus on casino business on board. And the explanation is not sufficient from the government side. Because I don't understand what they are saying with the social consensus. And my concrete question is related to policy on cruise and casino. Yes, Mr. Choi?
일단 카지노 허가는
The permit of casino is under the authorities of the Ministry of Sports, Culture, Sports, and Tourism. So I don't think I'm in the position to give you the authoritative answer. But when I said we first need social consensus, is because, well, as you all know, some people are really critical about the idea of building second Gangwon Land. And there are some negative aspects, definitely, and Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism is getting a lot of complaints from a lot of people. So we are in the process of having discussions and reviewing the public opinion. And when I said that Korean nationals are not allowed, it's only in the territorial waters, and in open sea, anyone can go into anywhere. But coastal area is definitely within the realm of territorial waters, so we are having this discussion. So I think we need to see the public consensus on this first, because of all this criticism. And this could be a source of social conflict anytime. That's why I said we need the social consensus first. Yeah, that's a very sensitive topic, but thank you for the answer.
제가 마이크를 안 잡으려고 했는데.
Today, actually, I didn't want to speak up. I work for PanStarLine.com. My name is Kwak Yun-soo. I'm the CEO of PanStarLine.com. I think your comment, Mr. Che, is somewhat faulty.
어디서
Well, if you're a Korean national, you can't go you can't visit any casino. It doesn't matter if you're on open seas or territorial waters. So you are going to break the law if you go into casino. Or as far as I know, if it's just within the social gambling, then that's when I said it's okay. Right. So about this issue, if you're on a Korean flag cruise, then you are still in Korea. If that cruise ship is run by Korean company, is operated by Korean company, then you are still in Korean territory. So as long as you are on board the ship that is operated by a Korean company, a Korean national flag ship, you can't gamble. You still can't gamble. It's still illegal. That's what I wanted to point out. So to make my comment brief, Korean national on board a Korean flag ship. Well, of course, I know you are doing the review, but the problem occurs when a ship is doing the flag of convenience, using this flag of convenience system. And then when a Korean national is on board this ship, then what happens? So there are a lot of issues to consider. So you, Dr. What you said that it's a matter of just a tourism product, but let's say that I chartered a PanStar cruise to attract 10,000 passengers for a month. So if let's say if they spend $1 million, each one spends $1 million, then that will be 10 billion, right? So that is the money we're talking about. And Mr. Che, you said you are seeing 30,000 passengers size. So that's much bigger money, right? So if this ship is not a Korean flag, then we are now talking about some leak of economy, leak of money. And that's why we have to have the Korean flag cruise ship. So I do agree that we need to have more Korean flag cruise ships. And casino will play a central role in turning around the profitability of those ships. So this is really urgent matter, and I really want the government to take this seriously. Yes, I do agree that casino is something that we can't ignore or evade when we talk about cruise industry promotion and economy and everything. So yes, there is a demand, urgent demand from private sector. And we need more discussions, definitely, but we're running out of time, so maybe we'll take the last question or comment from the audience.
간단하게만 좀 부탁을 드리겠습니다. 저희가 원래 12시인데 조금 시간이 지나서요. 네,
예,
드리겠습니다.
발표 토론 잘 들었습니다. 한 가지만 좀 말씀드리려고 합니다. 한국해양수산개발원 황진혜이고요. 기본적으로 저는 국적선의 카지노 허용되어야 된다 하는 입장에서 말씀드리는데 조금 논의가 이제 혼선이 있어서 제가 좀 말씀을 드려야 되겠다 싶은데 그 선박에서의 카지노 규제는 일반적으로 선박이든 어디든 관계없이 사업자 규제와 이용자 규제가 있는데 사업자에 대한 규제가 지금 현재 걸리는 문제가 있고 그걸 이제 저는 약간의 차별이 있다라는 생각이 들고요. 그다음에 이용자 규제는 우리가 한국 선박이든 외국 선박이든 그 관계없이 이제 저는 할 수 있다라는 그런 생각을 하고 있고요. 다만 도박이 안 되는 부분이어야 한다. 그래서 아까 과장님도 말씀하신 일시적인 노락은 우리가 다 이용되기 때문에 그 부분은 이제 문제가 안 된다 생각합니다. 그래서 사업자 규제를 어떻게 풀 건가 하는 부분에 좀 저는 이제 구분을 해서 이야기를 해야 된다. 이용자 규제와는 좀 분리를 했으면 좋겠다 이런 생각을 말씀드립니다. 이상입니다.
네. 한국해양수산개발원의 또 황진희 박사님께서 전문가적인 소견으로 다시 한번 좀 정리를 해주셨습니다. 그래서 요거는 저희가 다음에 기회 되면은 한번 다루는 걸로 하고요. 오늘 그 발제해분 세 분과 아마 앱으로 계실 하야시 상과 오늘 토론으로 나와주신 모든 분께 너무 진심으로 감사드리고 지금 점심시간이 넘었습니다. 넘었는데도 불구하고 이렇게 마지막까지 플로어에 참석해 주셔서 진심으로 감사드리며 지속적으로 저는 이제 국적 크루즈뿐만 아니라 어쨌든 우리나라 크루즈 산업 자체가 하나의 신산업을 활성화하기 위해서는 다양한 논의는 필요하다고 보고 그런 차원에서 오늘 다시 한번 더 감사드리겠습니다. 네, 고생 많으셨습니다. 네.